doing the little spinny thing. There we go. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Leigh. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We got a little bit confused with the links, so we had too many links. So please forgive us for that, but we will try to catch up the time and redeem it. So let us officially welcome you as Scrum Masters or role seekers, challengers to this virtual meeting. My name is Alioscha Chaplits, and I'm hosting this session with our amazing speaker and expert, Leigh Griffin. And he will be sharing some insights, inspiring ideas on the topic, how to get your first job as Scrum Master without prior experience. So welcome, Leigh.
Thanks very much. Delighted to be here, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation as the hour goes on.
Thank you. So just to provide you briefly the outline of our meeting, I would like to outline first our goal, so that we come into clear altogether. So we would like you to leave with answers to your questions and or food for thought. And we also would like you to leave with encouraged to implement one practical thing in reaching your professional goals. So in order to do that, we will have a flip interview as the first part, and then two more following parts. And so the interview will be 40 minutes long, and then there will be QA and feedback time, so about 20 minutes. And then we will have also maybe 15 minutes of extra time for you guys. So whoever wants to still hang out and ask specific questions, we will be for you there, and specifically Leigh, yeah. And so what will we address during this time? So we will focus on areas of skills, knowledge, and attitude, and how they will fit into the expectations of the employers as organizations and cultures. What we will not address is job questions or format of interviews. So during this time, you will be encouraged to ask questions. You can do it in a two-fold way. The first way is when you have a small question or a focus question you want to specify or kind of qualify something that we have said, you can write in the chat, and Leigh has already provided this opportunity for you. And if you have a bigger question or more serious question and loosely related question, then please save it for the later time to work with it on the gem board. In addition, you will also get a list of resources for further digging and actions. So in case of some force majeure, so maybe connection lost, we will just have to wait and reconnect. If that's all clear and you have no questions, then we'll go next, but I'll let you ask questions. Okay. All right, so there is already a lot of questions, so an example. Good, so you have no questions, good. All right, then let us briefly introduce ourselves. In this way, we will start our first part. This is a flip interview. All right, so I'll start as a host. I'll start first. So my name is Alioscha Chaplits. I'm originally from Ukraine. I'm married to a wonderful Swiss lady. I have 3 teenage kids, ages 16 through 20, and currently live in Switzerland. My superpower is natural influencer. So I really like to influence people. So, and my slogan for the year 2021, despite all the difficulties, go after things where energy and value is. And I have 20 plus years of experience with a large international non-profit organization as a team and project leader, mentor, coach, change agent, and so on and so forth. I have switched to IT about 3.5 years ago to a QA role, and since then I have been trying to make an entry into Scrum Mastery. And the question, why is this topic important for me? as I applied for Scrum Master roles, I felt like I will, but I'm not allowed to enter this role in my particular context. And in particular, I saw that my previous experiences and expertise are not looked upon as favorable. And I wanted to know why. And this is this triggered a podcast panel interview that preceded this session and this session itself. So now I turn this opportunity to introduce himself to Leigh.
Hey, thank you very much. So my name is Leigh Griffin, and I am based in Waterford, Ireland. I'm currently working as a senior engineering manager with Red Hat. So I look after a team of around 36 people. And we've been following an agile approach for the last 2 years. We've been on an agile transformation. In terms of my background, it's been purely in IT. So I went and done an undergrad in software engineering, went off and became a software engineer, discovered I wasn't a great software engineer, and discovered I was probably better off pointing out issues with the process, but more importantly, making recommendations to help improve that. That wandered me into my first kind of role as a development lead / Scrum Master, where I got to bring in an agile approach in a greenfield kind of project. And that was enough, combined with my kind of approach to coaching and working with the mindset with people, to bring myself forward into Red Hat as an agile coach, primarily working on making a SaaS product more agile. So we went from having 9 releases in a year to 33 releases in a year within a kind of 18-month window. I've been in people management for 5+ years now across 2 companies. And I still practice the Scrum Master kind of toolkit and the Scrum Master approach. And it's important to me to get into a topic like this because there's a shortage of really good Scrum Masters out there. I really like building and growing people and helping them realize their potential. And I've done this with agile practitioners is the general term we kind of call it in Red Hat, because we don't want to be vendor locked in to say we're just doing Scrum. We want to embrace Kanban, Lean, and other approaches. And I've seen people flourish that had no kind of background in this area. Dogs are most welcome on the call, but if we could mute, that'd be fantastic with it if we're not talking. In terms of just the personal side of it, I'm married with 3 wonderful babies in the house. They're a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, and a 6-week-old. So you might hear some noise in the background. It's totally normal, and there's nothing wrong. It's just kids being kids. Mm-hmm. So that's me.
All right, thank you so much. Quick question for you all. We gave you the opportunity to put some questions that you might have on the background of your mind up there on the Jamboard. Had everyone had this opportunity to do this? Is that correct? Do I see everyone? If not, so I would encourage you to maybe take 30 seconds and make it postage there or quick post note there. All right. Okay, so far so good. As Leigh and I worked together on this topic, actually we came together in last November as I contacted him on LinkedIn. So we came up with basically 7 questions that we would like to address during this part of the interview. And the first question, I think, it is something that I feel strongly as I apply. I feel strongly about when I apply for a Scrum Master role and I get a negative reply. And so I would like you to help us to get this one right off the chest. And this sounds like this. Do the issues of age, sex, cultural fitness, safety, technical affinity, and in-house recruiting, stage of agile transformation, play a role in selecting a candidate for a short list? Is there such a thing as the vicious cycle of no experience, no employment, no experience? So can you address it, please?
So this was one question, but the reality is it's about 10 questions in one.
Right.
There's a lot in there. I mean, the first thing to unpack here, discrimination is a major no-no in hiring. So as a manager and working with our talent acquisition team or recruiters, as they're known, we have zero interest in discriminating against age, sex, religious beliefs, or any of the other kind of 6 or 7 main discriminatory kind of factors around there. So that is totally a non-runner, and we will hire and interview anybody if they fit the right bill. In terms of the cultural fitness, we do hire for culture. We have to hire for culture. When you're trying to create a good team, you want to make sure that everyone gels well together. You don't have to be best friends or anything like that at all, but you have to make sure that the person that's coming in will fit in with that environment and that mode. And the thing about culture is big multinationals have established a culture. It's where they build their identity from. And it's often driven by a set of values and so on. And that kind of drives the recruitment to the point you're looking at a cultural fit for about 60% of the candidate's profile. The other 40% has to be the base skills to exceed and succeed at the job. So yes, we do hire for culture. Often in smaller companies, the culture mightn't be there. They're trying to find the culture, and you can bring something to that mix, which is going to be unique. A lot of companies make the mistake of focusing on structure before we're focusing on culture. If you do it in that order, the change won't stick. If you manage to fit the culture around the process and get it interweaved so people will manipulate the process and the structure you're trying to bring in and magnify it through the culture, you get a longer lasting agile transformation, which is why the majority of agile transformations that are out there are not sticking to an exclusive framework like Scrum. They always are magnified by other aspects. So we want new candidates coming in, bringing those cultural aspects and that insight to help work with what we have. In terms of in-house recruiting is a thing, and it is a huge problem for external candidates. And I have great empathy for anyone that's competing against an in-house candidate, not because the in-house candidate is better. It's because there is a huge desire, particularly in the IT industry, to retain talent. It costs about 140% of someone's salary to replace someone. And that cost is not just the maybe new inflated salary you have to pay from the market conditions, it's the cross-training. It's the cost of the team losing time to bring that person up to speed, and not to mention the intangible costs of the knowledge drain that's gone out of the company. So where possible, companies will strive to do their best to bring internal candidates to final rounds of interviews. That doesn't mean that they get the automatic first choice. That can't be the case. I'm just off a round of interviews today where we've had internal and external candidates, and the external candidate is going to be made an offer. But we will use that to give feedback to the internal candidates to further their career and move them in the right direction. So yes, you are competing against a retention issue, but that's not going to prevent you competing when it gets to the final crunch. It might prevent you getting to the last 3 if there's exceptional internal candidates. Because remember, internal candidates understand the culture and they understand maybe the process that needs to change. Now, you mentioned as well about the stage of the agile transformation. That plays a massive part in it because the maturity of the organization will really dictate the kind of candidate that they want. If you're in a large organization which is already on the agile journey, they can afford to hire someone and double down and expand their team and take a risk and a gamble to hire for potential. But if you're in a company that's only starting the agile transformation, they most likely don't know what they want, who they want, or why they want it. They just know agile is a thing and they got to go in this direction for various reasons. And you're at the mercy there of them looking for people with experience. They'll be dazzled by the resume that has X number of years experience and all of these certifications. And I'm assuming that candidate is going to do a great interview because they have all of this experience. So absolutely, the stage of the transformation will influence what candidates that we want to progress and look towards. Now, to just maybe finish here, the cycle of no experience, no employment, no experience. It can exist, but define what experience is. Like, what is it that the company wants or needs? What unique selling point can you bring to the role? And what can you do in your current employment to kind of eke out some agile experience? Because experience is not just years on the resume that says you've worked in this role with this defined title. It's the application of the principles, the tools, the approach, the thought process. That's what matters to me.
All right. Thank you so much. It's very expensive and detailed question, right? Because there are quite a few things mentioned in it. I feel like you guys are experiencing some kind of tension. So you on one hand you want some new blood, on the other hand you want to retain the other people, and so yeah, it's also difficult on your side, as I can see. Okay, so the next question will kind of help us to survey the current situation, maybe in the market in some sense, and we can establish the point a starting point in our journey as someone who wants to challenge a role of a Scrum Master. All right, so the question is, what is the reality of a Scrum Master role in 2021? How do companies actually utilize the Scrum Master role from an insider's vantage point of view?
Okay, I think this is a great question, because the reality on the ground might not be the reality that you see at conferences, that you see at meetups, that you read in blogs, and that the Scrum Guide kind of projects. I narrowly refer people to the State of Scrum reports that come out year on year. I haven't seen this year's one. That's not to say it hasn't been out yet, but there's a trend to move away from pure Scrum. There's a trend to move towards hybrid Scrum. And that's very telling, because that means that organizations are not using Scrum as per the Scrum Guide. And my own experience, and from attending conferences and networking with people, is that the actual Scrum Master role is now about 4 or 5 unique different roles in one from a competency perspective. You'll find yourself taking on light project management or even program management duties where you're looking after a range of projects across the board. The reason you do that is that for some reason, companies decided to abandon project management and delegate that towards engineering management or the Scrum Master, because they find it's a redundant role when you have a Scrum Master acting as a natural information radiator, projecting the confidence of the project, what timelines look like, the burn up or burn down charts, and so on. And that's kind of made the role a little bit fuzzy. Now, I personally think Scrum Masters should have a good grasp of project management just from a basic skill perspective. But a lot of companies will misuse the Scrum Master role as a proxy project manager. And that can often turn into the Scrum Master feeling like a secretary for the team, that they have to attend meetings that have nothing to do with the Scrum ceremonies, but they're there to take notes on behalf of the team to bring it back in. They almost take the servant leadership a step too far, and become that secretary for the team. And that can be a worrying place to be, because the spokesperson role is really not what you want as a Scrum Master. You're also going to find the conflict between the coaching skills. So the Scrum Guide actually doesn't emphasize too much the importance of coaching with respect to being a Scrum Master. The whole point of a Scrum Master is a mastery of Scrum. And your ability there is to coach other people. So it's not just a hand-holding of the process, the ceremonies, and helping remove impediments. It's keying teams up to be self-sufficient and stand on their own feet. The best Scrum Master is a Scrum Master that's unemployed within their team in about 18 months, that they've done their job and can move on to a new challenge in the wider organization. So you will definitely underplay the coaching skills at the start and may never get to experience the coaching skills, because often the Scrum Master won't have the optimal number of teams, which is 1 to 2 teams. You might have 4 to 5 teams, maybe even more than that. You're bordering into scaled agile territory, because the company hiring you doesn't maybe realize that this is a dedicated role with small focused teams that you can really work on the mindset and the coaching. And what ends up happening is you're sitting in a layer above teams and given light coaching and light direction across the board versus, I suppose, the war room kind of feel that you want to be in. Now that's generalizing. I'm sure lots of companies are using them perfectly, but I know my own Scrum Master or Agile practitioner in the team is doing a mix of coaching, elements of project management, relationship management with stakeholders, and even elements of people management from one-on-one and helping people with careers and advice and so on, which gives a very, very wide range of skills that Scrum Masters can bring to the role, but will benefit you people as job seekers to come into that.
All right. Yeah, sounds like um, very bright spectrum of skills that is required, and companies are trying to utilize them to the utmost opportunity, if you will. Yeah, but on the other hand, as job seekers that come from different backgrounds, we can bring in different skills, right? So that if it's a perfect match, so to speak, then yeah, it can happen. All right. So the next question number 3, is important for us in the sense to have clarity. How should we view the role of Scrum Master, as an entry level or a war veteran position?
What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, you brought up this picture. Yeah, actually, when I saw it first, I was somewhat upset and actually enraged even to a degree when I saw this picture. Well, because it does generalize the newbies and maybe put them into this infantile category of people who know nothing about life and so on and so forth. What do I think about it? Yeah, this is what a candidate might hear from a hiring manager. And I believe behind this picture, you can imagine a Scrum Master quality gate. Well, I'm speaking now from a quality assurance perspective. So there are 10 stances of a Scrum Master. And if I were to number them, there would be servant leader, coach, facilitator, teacher, mentor, manager, impediment remover, and a change agent. Experience of a development team member and mentored by Scrum Master, an experienced Scrum Master. So this is really a lot if you look at it. And this is certainly a war veteran role if we look from that perspective. And it really feels intimidating and even overwhelming. But I believe no one who is present here and nobody in the world was born into this role. So we all have to start somewhere. And this is what I feel, maybe confusion and discrepancy as I think about yeah, this position.
It's a very tricky question to answer, and you can even hear the conflict in how you described it there as well. The thing with those 10 stances, what it reminds me of, if there's anyone here that classifies himself as a full stack developer or have seen a job description for a full stack developer. So full stack developer is front end, back end, a little bit of UX, mobile experience. You bring mobile in, you pretty much are looking at Android, iOS, maybe some of the other phone systems right now. And they also want operating system experience. They're effectively looking for a unicorn. And that does not exist. That is the perfect role that's out there. And I've seen a fantastic quote, and it was just an anonymous quote on the internet. And it said, when someone's looking for a full stack developer, they're not looking for this all singing, all dancing technical wizard. They're looking for someone that won't complain too much if they're asked to do something that's just outside of their skill set. And that resonated so much with me. And when you just mentioned the 10 areas, it's the first thing that came to my mind, because that's what we want from our Scrum Master. If we do ask them to say, hey, will you step in and run a program call for a couple of weeks because someone's on PTO, it shouldn't cause too much friction. If you ask them to step in and do training classes to try and bring people along, again, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. But what you're looking at here, if you are to hit the 10 stances, you absolutely need to be a war veteran to hit all of them. It's impossible to actually get the skill set, the competencies within each of those areas is so difficult. If you've ever seen the X-Wing of Agile coaching, if you literally Google for X-Wing of Agile coaching, you'll find some of those quadrants in there. So they're looking for a coach with business knowledge for coaching, the actual Scrum or Agile knowledge, the technical knowledge to go with it, the facilitation, the training knowledge, very similar to those 10 kind of steps that you talk. But more often than not, as a coach, you'll only tilt into one or two of those quadrants at a time. that makes it much more newbie friendly or entry level friendly, as you called it there. So if you take, for example, the coaching element, the leadership style, which is the servant leadership, the facilitation aspect, anyone with experience in people management or team leadership, information radiation as a good communicator, these are universal skills. They're not right, you're born with those skills you develop in your current role, but they're wholly applicable to the role of a Scrum Master. And they will start ticking some of those 10 stances boxes. And what you're trying to do is find what the organization needs. So if you go and look at an organization at the beginning, they might want more agile knowledge and maybe more communication skills just to start the ball rolling. A company at the far end of it or the middle of the transition might want someone more focused on training and more focused on embedding the mindset at a coaching level.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, companies often don't know what they want here. So they don't know that they want the war veteran or the brand new person. They often just look for the certification as their gateway to grant you an interview. They look at the resume, they see certified Scrum Master and a whole host of other Agile certifications. And if you can pitch your resume towards eliciting your best self in those other areas by talking about your leadership, talking about your style to communication, talking about how you manage conflict, how you coach people, it's giving the allure of much more experience that maybe your job title has not reflected. And that to me makes it a level playing field. And this goes back to almost the first question about what does the company need. So it can be viewed as needing a war veteran because it brings that sense of validity to the role. But to me, the veteran won't win out in all competitions because the company wants different things and needs different things.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you so much. Yeah, I feel like there is some kind of universal maximum minimum, the one that cannot be reduced to nothing, right? So like, for example, basic soft skills like communication or radiation of information, and that we should look at as something that we can present as a value to the to an organization. All right, so your answer actually can serve us as a great leeway to our next question. And the next question is, what matters most for the employer, your potential or your previous experience?
Again, difficult because there's no one fits all answer here for it. I will always hire for potential. And the reason you want to hire for potential and the reason this is attractive to companies is you get to work with that person and hopefully they're malleable enough that you can mold them into the Scrum Master that not that they want to be necessarily because they don't know what the job entails until they get into the company, but what your team needs it to be. The very fact that most teams have a hybrid version of Scrum interspersed with different agile techniques going into it means hiring a war veteran in and someone with years of experience can be a very poor cultural clash because that person is coming with their own experience, possibly their own ego, and suddenly they're meeting a team that is willing to do this, but the organizational structure around it is just not set up for it. There's very few organizations that are top to bottom agile. What you will often find is development teams, and most of my experiences in software engineering, so apologies for generalizing that around development teams, but generally software development teams are on an island. And that island is perfectly fine for agile transformations, but when you step off of that island, they're flowing into a waterfall. They have to adhere to corporate standards. They might have legal requirements around how they release software. They might have to comply with certain acts that are in the healthcare sphere. You have the HIPAA acts and so on. All of that creates a flow problem from an agile perspective. And certainly in Red Hat, like most large companies that I've worked in, you'll make recommendations and coach the team towards recommendations that are just impossible to implement. We can't change this because this is how we do business. This is literally the end result of it. There's a very cynical view about hiring for potential in that it's a lower salary. And that is an awful thing to say, but the reality is budgets are budgets. And if we can hire someone that has taken all the hallmarks that we can grow as an associate the whole way up to the senior level, or a junior to senior, to use maybe more general terms around it, that can be more attractive, and it lowers the risk as well. Because if this does turn out to be a failed transformation, and a lot of transformations fail, or this person doesn't turn out to be the right candidate, we haven't really wasted too much time or money from an investment perspective. Very cynical view, but it's the reality of it. But the ability to grow your own Scrum Master towards your form of agility, that to me is key, because you're bringing someone in that is willing to grow and wanting to take that journey on. But again, if your company needs someone that has that experience to pull them along for a certain period of the journey, that's going to win in that scenario. But my hope would be most companies would be hiring for potential, because an agile transformation is a long-term transformation.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again for a very detailed answer. And I guess as someone who is looking at it from the outside, I even develop some kind of empathy for you, if you will, even a sympathy. Yeah, because you are juggling a lot of dependencies. In that sense, you want to incorporate a foreign body, meaning a new candidate, that really can be a risk to an organization. And just from my personal experience, as I was just listening to you, and I was reflecting on my experiences. Yeah, I'm almost 50 years of age, and if I looked at as someone who has a potential, there is some kind of logical incongruity, if you will, right? So people actually look at me and say, well, he might be actually someone who has his own biases and so on and so forth. So I'm more of a risk in that sense than someone who is fresh out of a university. So you guys who are young, you guys have more chances, I guess. So this is just my grievance, from before.
We don't discriminate on age, so you're okay there.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah. The reality is a bit different. Yeah. All right. So if everyone is okay there, don't need a small break, sanitary break, so we'll continue on. We're a little bit behind schedule, I guess.
Yeah, we might just maybe skip question 6, and probably the last 5 and 7 are probably the 2 bigger ones to go through. And if we have time, we can bring elements of 6 into the lean coffee, perhaps.
All right. So, but maybe I would not skip question number 7. I think given that we actually covered a lot in these last 40 minutes or 35 minutes, maybe you, as someone who is hiring people, who just had today an interview, could answer or could tell us, what should a hopeful candidate with no prior industry-specific experience ultimately do to get his, her first Scrum Master role in 2021? I guess this is what also people ask in the chat there.
Yeah, and I think there's, again, no magic wand that we can kind of cast and say this is how you're going to do it. It is a long journey, and for me, making a plan is key. And if you make a plan and treat that as your own personal backlog, you're getting a lot of agile experience naturally from that. So having a plan and setting goals to allow you bridge what we call certain skills and knowledge gaps. Now, I'm just going to briefly share my screen just to show you something which is actually a training and kind of management best practices. It's called SCA, and it's not the music, before anyone is thinking that. It stands for skills, knowledge, and attitude. And what we're trying to create for workers is the right set of skills combined with the theoretical knowledge to allow them thrive in a role. And if we pair that with attitude, we basically get your career best. So skills are really things that end in ing, or words very similar to that. So if you put singing or dancing, I should be able to test that fairly easily and say, jump up on the table, sing a song, dance for me, and so on. And if you look up maybe agile skills and look up your job specs and all that, you'll see things like story writing, decomposing stories, stakeholder management. They're very key skills that are, transferable into different aspects of your working life. Now, knowledge is really the base theory, is the information. So the Scrum Guide is probably your biggest knowledge base for your qualifications, your certifications are all enhancing your knowledge. And what you're trying to do is bridge that gap. So if you have a skill gap that is identifiable on a job spec and go, hey, I just can't do story writing, for example, get more knowledge on it. read a book on it, attend a meetup, network with other people to see can you kind of bridge that gap. But the big one for me is attitudes. This goes back to culture. I nearly replace attitudes with culture because that's what we're hiring for. So we're looking for people that are self-motivated, that are confident, that are a natural continuous improvement learner. So come across as someone that constantly wants to bring themselves on, because you project that into your team ultimately. And there's a whole host of different attitudes depending on the company you're looking for. So do your homework on companies as part of your plan, or industry sectors that you want to kind of focus on. And we have this fantastic model in Red Hat called the OPT. And this is also something that I would encourage you to bake into your plan. It stands for organization, passion, and talent. And effectively, you need to make a list of what you're passionate about. Now, I can't tell you that. That's obviously very personal for everybody. But you want to look at where that overlaps with your talent and use that as a force effect or a magnifier. So if you're very passionate about something and have the natural skills and talents to do that, your goal now is to find the organization, which is really the role or the company that will allow you harness those skills and talents. And that then is what we call your career best. That's where you are operating at a level that the company is getting a genuine return on investment in terms of your ability and your capability. So discover your opt, discover the SCA that you need to succeed for your form of a Scrum Master or your agile role. And you do that by doing your homework on companies, on areas, and trying to discover what can actually help you in those job applications. Now, the other thing you can do is look at your current role and see, can you make it more agile? Can you introduce really small things like your own personal definition of done? Can you bring like a Kanban kind of flow to your work so you can plan your day and talk about how you plan it and prioritize? Can you bring any of the general agile aspects like retrospectives or your own limited agile flavor? Because if you can do that when you get to an interview, you can then talk about real world examples. So how you're trying to create an agile island within your own team. And failing all that, if for some reason you can't do that in your job, volunteering is a great way of doing this. So open source communities are crying out for people to get involved. People think because they don't develop or can't write code that they can't contribute to open source. The Fedora community, for example, which I'm heavily involved with, are right now asking for help with program management. Now, program management is almost a relative of Agile because it talks about planning, it talks about execution, it talks about prioritization and good communication skills. And they're looking for volunteers. And other communities are looking for similar. I also volunteered in my local school several years ago when they were fundraising, and ran their fundraising initiatives as an 8-week agile project divided into sprints, so they could prioritize what was the most value with finite resources and time to try and maximize the money they were going to make from a fundraising perspective. And I listed that on my resume, and I got great talking points out of it when I was going for jobs. So get a plan in place, start networking, going to talks like this, going to conferences, connecting with people on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. I'll paste my link in after this, and Twitter as well. Absolutely follow me and connect. The other thing you can do is seek and hire a coach. So hire someone that will help you get one-on-one dedicated coaching time. There are volunteers out there that give their time freely for this. There's paid people that do it. So do your homework, look up people on it, and connect with folks like that, because they have the experience that can help you untap your own potential. Because the thing with coaching is you know the answers already, you know your inherent skills, and the coach will help bring that out. So that's what I think you can do. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you so much. You actually brought us several either I would say tips or even tools how you can excel in seeking a role, seeking the first role as Scrum Master. So people here in chat are asking, you already see it probably, where can we get first experiences, maybe like GitHub or something?
Yeah, so I was literally typing, but it's easier to maybe verbalize this. If you get in on Twitter or look on GitHub and look for the most popular communities out there. So Fedora is a big community. You have Kubernetes, React, all of the major kind of tools that are open source have communities associated with them. But you join that community by following their how to contribute guide. Join their mailing list, introduce yourself, tell them your skills, and say, hey, you'd love to help out in any capacity you can. And I can guarantee you within an hour, someone will reply going, fantastic, come in and we'll have a conversation, because volunteers are obviously very difficult to find because people are squeezed for time, which is understandable. But yeah, get involved. Just reach out and start asking, connecting with people. Most open source communities have a kind of governance model, so you can kind of find the people that are in the leadership positions, and you want to look for someone that deals with the release schedules, because that's probably the closest role to a Scrum Master from a reach out perspective.
All right, great. Quick question. It's a bit spontaneous, but you addressed job seekers and gave them several practical tips how to get about their business, so to speak, of getting the first role. What about maybe one ultimate advice to hiring managers like yourself? What would you recommend?
I think you need to take a gamble. You need to look at the wider skills that you need to succeed in it. I hired in almost 2 years ago now a product owner into the team, and the girl had no experience as a product owner, but she had fantastic communication and project management skills and was a real people person. And I looked at that from a potential and said, this is someone that I could shape into a product owner role. And I think the one tip for a hiring manager is not look at the immediate need. Look at the medium to long term, because that's where you get most value. Because if you bring someone into that role that they themselves feel underqualified for, they'll feel exceptionally grateful. They'll have a lot of rapport and loyalty with you and the team, and are more willing to go that extra yard from an engagement perspective to ensure they succeed at the role. And if they succeed at the role from a validation perspective, you in turn will reap those rewards.
I really like your response. Thank you. God bless your heart for that. All right. So now we came actually to the time when we can ask questions, and we were thinking to do it in the format of Lean Coffee. And yes, thank you, Leigh. Yeah, I will just briefly introduce it, but I would like to ask.
I was just going to give a suggestion, because folks have put some really good questions and topics here. And I'm conscious of time, and it's probably late in folks' time zones as well, and we have about 10 minutes. Would we prefer to go through and maybe answer and address some of the expectations that people had, or do we want to go with the Lean Coffee format? If you just want to type in the chat what you prefer, and we'll be flexible with that.
That's a good thing.
And see if we maybe addressed or didn't address some of the gaps and all that. Okay, so Shane has given a +1 for the questions. Okay, it's 2 to 0, which is enough.
Yeah, actually, it's a good thing, because my browser is not working very well. So if
no worries.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, let's go through this now then, right? So the first question, I'll go in kind of clockwise manner here. Any training or certifications that you can recommend for new Scrum Masters or aspiring Scrum Masters? I won't answer this with the obvious way and say take a Scrum Master certification, be it Scrum.org or Scrum Alliance. I think that should be a given. I'd highly recommend looking at an Agile coaching certification. So I have the ICF, I think it's called ACP, which is their Agile coaching certificate. They're very affordable, which is important. But more importantly, it starts broadening your horizons on the fact that coaching is a core competency and component of an Agile practitioner or Scrum Master role. And if you can complement that then with the base Scrum knowledge that you've gained, it puts you in a very marketable position. There's other courses around. You can look at Scrum Master KMP, Kanban Management Professional, which is on the Lean Kanban University, I believe. That can help you with flow. It can help you with visualizations. It can give you an additional feather to your cap, because Kanban pairs really, really well with Scrum from a framework perspective. But I wouldn't go overboard on the training side of it until you've identified what kind of Scrum Master you want to be and what your unique selling point actually is. Because you might, for example, have a very poor project management background, and it might make sense to take something from the PMI, the Project Management Institute, to try and complement your existing skills, but plug the gap that you have from a project management point of view. So I hope that answered that question. What are some things to look for when looking for a fully agile company? Great question, because they don't advertise it up front and to say, hey, we're agile. And if they do, they're probably not. Look at LinkedIn, look at Twitter, look for YouTube videos from people speaking at that company. I attend a lot of conferences, and all you need to do is look up Agile 2021 is coming up soon. Look at the last couple of years of that, the XP conference and so on, and spot the speakers and look at their company name. And that'll give you a broad horizon of where people are from that perspective. Again, no easy way to do this. A little bit of detective work, I think, will figure that out for you. And someone just asked about this certification. It is ICP ACC. Thank you, Eric, for linking that. Okay, I think we've answered expectations via the real job, but if I was missing something there, please ask it in the chat. Tips for overcoming the software or IT experience expectation. Again, another great question. There is an affinity between hiring a Scrum Master that comes from a development background. And to me, it's one of the worst hires you can make, because the Scrum Master doesn't stay in coach mode and changes into almost expert or mentor kind of mode very easily. There's three styles of leadership. There's there's expert leader, achiever leader, and catalyst leader. And expert leader is someone that comes with a huge background in that area. They're the expert. They're going to roll up their sleeves and push people away. So when the team get blocked, they're more likely to go in and do a code walkthrough with the team and show them exactly where they went wrong. And the team loses the learning opportunity. You have the achiever leader who will tell everyone how great they were and what great experience they have and can talk the talk because they've walked the walk. Not very good, because they'll rather talk about themselves and they'll rather talk about their experience and maybe force some of their views onto the team. And then you have the catalyst leader who's going to step back, take things in and coach what they see. And you can guess which one the ideal Scrum Master should be. So overcoming that bias is not much you can do from your side. It's more at an industry level that they need to realize that the right style of leader from a transformational perspective needs to be in that catalyst category. When you get to an interview and these questions come up, Scrum doesn't really mention the word software anymore. That's an old perspective. I think the last two iterations have totally neutralized it. In fact, the biggest growing area for Scrum is HR. Human resources is where Scrum has really taken off in the last year or two. So that can help to refer back to the Scrum Guide has neutralized this. It talks about value in the generic sense. It talks about customers, teams, engagement, and the overall ceremonies and so on. So that's how I'd approach that. But this is an industry issue, unfortunately, as well. I hope we've addressed this expectation. So as an already employed Scrum Master, what they can do to make better job applications. But again, if not, please hit us in the chat. A framework or tool set for a job search. If someone could maybe unpack that a little bit in the chat, that'd be great. Does that mean how do you search for jobs? I'll try and answer it in that category. And if not, please let me know if I got it wrong. LinkedIn and Twitter and the social connections is really important. Broadening your social network. Unfortunately, in a lot of roles, it's not just what you know, it's who you know. So to have someone to be able to vouch for you, because companies, particularly like Red Hat, most of their hires come from referrals. I think we have about a 60% referral rate. And that's not unusual, because you're hiring someone based on a recommendation and a cultural fit. And the first question it asks when we try to send a referral link to someone is this person a good culture fit? And have you taken the training and read up on the docs by what we mean about culture fit? That can help, right? So getting connected with people, that would be the biggest framework and tool that I could look at. Also, Eric mentioned about the framework. It could be Scrum, be safe, be less. Absolutely. Very few companies have achieved large-scale agile. So safe and less and so on, they might list them as requirements, but very few people have the experience to say they've done that. To me, base level Scrum, working with individuals and teams at a small kind of scale is pretty much where that framework might be. But big companies might be trying to change that in the coming years. Okay, I want a practical advice or tool how to approach Scrum Master role applications. I think we might have answered that just in the last one, but please, again, jump in if I didn't. It's just hard to kind of gauge when it's just a singular question there. With all the multiple hats and roles, what are one or two of the most important skills a new Scrum Master should focus on? I'm going to throw something new out here based, I gave an answer earlier about the different kind of skills and approaches and expectations versus the reality. But to add maybe two more skills that I think would be really worthwhile focusing on. The first is psychological safety. Is becoming huge in the industry, especially when people are remote working now, and we're losing the in-person interaction. So we can't tell if someone is happy or sad or upset about a suggestion or an idea or a problem that's gone wrong. And there's a fantastic book on psychological safety by Amy Edmondson called The Fearless Organization. I'd highly recommend reading or listening to that. Establishing psychological safety in a team allows for innovation. It allows for the team to feel safe failing, and failure is your friend in a Scrum world. You want to fail fast and fail early, because that gives you the opportunity to learn and take something forward from it. And failure is never something to punish. And if you can come across in a job interview, which one of our candidates did today, which is why the person is getting the role more or less, they talked about embracing failure and creating that safety net and helping people and coaching them through it. The other skill is, of course, coaching. I mentioned it at the side, but going down the likes of the ICP ACC route is really, really good for a quick fix. I am personally following the ICF ACC accreditation. And ICF is the International Coaching Federation, but this is almost a 2-year journey for me and is a very formal professional coaching skill. I would not encourage that to be your main route into agile coaching and Scrum Mastery, but if you have that background and experience, it should be a very easy transition. So psychological safety and coaching would be my answer there. And Shane has a question here. No experience. I'd love to know, how do I get the skills needed to be a Scrum Master? I think we addressed that, Shane, going through it. But
yeah, you did. So that was earlier in the presentation.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm just looking at the chat here. You did ask a question, would working as a tech support help with going into a Scrum Master role? I think working in any industry will help with a Scrum Master role, but working in tech support, you're dealing with conflict, you're trying to deal with prioritizations, you're very customer-centric. You can communicate internally with teams, because tech support are normally a fulcrum role to take information in from a customer, project that into internal teams, take information back, and prioritize the responses and so on. When you're writing your resume for a Scrum Master role, you should really look to focus on transferable skills. So with no disrespect to your tech support role, I think most people would be able to guess the role of a tech support, bar maybe small nuances from an industry to industry perspective. But sell me the transferable skills. In your resume, literally call out, here are my transferable skills. And if you want to see the Appendix 1, which has all the actual day-to-day job duties, you can read that in your spare time. But if I'm a hiring manager for a Scrum Master, I really don't want to know that you were closing X number of cases a day and meeting your targets and were helping people with first level support and so on. I want to know what skills you valued and are going to bring to my role, if that makes sense on it.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I feel like we addressed all of the questions, even my example one, which is good. So we are right on time. Yeah, time boxed. Thinking in philosophy works, right? So we have 2 things left to do in within this hour. I would like to ask you, Leigh, if you could provide us with the list of resources that I deposited there on Google as an attachment in the chat, so that people can go maybe read somebody else's story and so on and so forth. So that would be helpful, because people are trying to look for examples and ways to get into those roles, or maybe they're looking for some patterns how to hire people. Yeah. So, all right. And the other thing would be, there is also a small questionnaire that we've created to elicit your feedback. If you don't mind, take 4 minutes, because there are 4 questions and they're quite simple, I think, maybe even less than 4 minutes to answer those questions. And then we will start an informal Q&A time if you have a desire. If not, it's okay with us. But thank you so much, Leigh, for taking time of your very busy schedule and investing into every one of us.
And what I'm going to say, we did skip 2 questions because we started a little bit late, and I probably answered in way more depth than I thought I would going into it. So what we'll do, we'll follow up with maybe a podcast or maybe a quick recording for YouTube. So if people want to follow us on social media, let me just paste in, say, my LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm kind of forgetting what my name is right now. So late in the day on a Friday, not a great time to be doing anything really. So this is my LinkedIn. Quite happy to connect. And if people do want to chat to me more, get more interest and exposure to maybe how to go through and get an actual Scrum Master role, I'm always happy to chat with people. And there is my Twitter handle as well. Actually, to give the URL is probably a little bit easier to click on it. So what we'll do when we do get the recording or the podcast or whatever that might look like, we'll share it out through the social channels and maybe the Scrum Master Toolbox Eventbrite mail as well, just so it hits everyone.
All right, great. So yeah, we might even maybe write a brief article, because we already have a lot of stuff covered in the written form as well. All right. So I would like to ask all of you who are still here to go to the link with the feedback questionnaire and fill it if possible. So those are just your impressions. Maybe, Leigh, can you go to the questionnaire, because my
yeah, sure.
browser is frozen. Sorry.
Let me share that out, and I'm actually going to have to drop in the next few moments. I'm hearing a lot of noise in my background just with the kids, so apologies. But here's the couple of questions we have. Like, what one thing did you take away from our session today? So that can be something new or reminded. What question or questions do you feel you want more info on? Because we're quite happy to do follow-up blogs or talks and so on, and appreciate that there's a lot of nuances in terms of the answers for people's specific circumstance. In the very traditional Agile retrospective form, we would like to find out what you liked about the session, because we always want to build on the positives. But equally, is there something that you feel we could have done better on? Notwithstanding the technological issues at the start, which we do apologize for. But look, we're into continuous improvement. We want to learn, and hopefully we'll get to do this again one day. And your feedback here would be absolutely invaluable.
Okay. So I guess everyone can take their time without us. It should work, right? Okay. So if anyone is willing to maybe hang out for 5 more minutes before Leigh goes, I'm willing to hang out as well here. So please indicate in the chat. So otherwise, we wish you very restful and peaceful weekend if possible, and so please recuperate for the next week and continue strong. Thank you so much for taking part in the session.
And thank you, Alioscha, for the idea, for the drive, the passion for pulling this together. I only had to turn up and just answer questions. I think you've done the hard work in terms of the organization and the connecting them with the community, so thank you very much for it.
You're very welcome, and all the compliments to you as well.
Okay, I might stop the recording now, just so we have the formal end of the recording as well.